front-end framework. Very happy to have you all here. So today we will be exploring not one, but 3 front-end perspectives: Vue, React, and Angular, led by none other than the experts on our panel today. So without further ado, allow me to introduce you to our gurus. First up is our very own Ashani, our resident Vue maverick. So apart from being one of the brightest and bubbliest characters around the office, Ashani is an associate tech lead over here at GapStars. And today, she will be taking you through the main concepts of Vue, including lifecycle hooks, composition APIs, and state management with Vuex, just to name a few. Thanks for being with us, Ashani.
Glad to be here, Sarah.
So next up is our humble React genius, Jaddu. So Jaddu is a tech lead over here at GapStars, and he's got an interesting session lined up for you, covering the ins and outs of React application architecture, how React can be used in building accessible tech for everyone, and of course, the best practices associated with the library. Happy to have you here, Jaddu.
Hi, everybody.
And now for none other than our Angular guru, who has also jumped on the Explorer series bandwagon, Sajitharan Sinnathurai from Microsoft. So you guys might be familiar with some of his tech talks or workshops that he has done before. And today he will be taking us through the Angular ecosystem, architecture and tooling. And of course, tips and tricks for better performance. Thank you so much for jumping on board, Saji.
Thanks, Zara, for the wonderful introduction, and thanks, GapStars, for providing an opportunity to be a part of this webinar. Looking forward to this session. Yeah.
Lovely. So now that you guys are familiar with our panelists, let's dive right in. I'd also like to quickly remind you that our chat box is open for any questions that you guys might have. So do drop them in. We will be taking them up during our Q&A. In addition to that, we are also live on Facebook. So if you are watching through that, drop your questions in there and we will take them in as well. Right. And with that, let's kick off. Ashani, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for the introduction as well. Let me share the screen first. So hi everyone, I am Ashani. I work as an ATL at GapStars. Today I will be walking you through the fundamentals that we need when we are developing a Vue application. So these will be the ones that I will be covering today. So let's start right away. 1 second. So what is Vue? Vue, what is all the hype about in Vue? So Vue is a JavaScript framework that makes implementing interactive user interfaces and single web page applications easier for us. By single page applications are also called SPAs. So in here, what happens is the server is going to respond with one page, and Vue is going to take control over from there. So Vue is also Vue has been created by Ivan Yu. It's the Vue core library focuses only on the Vue layer. It's open source. It's really easy to understand, elegant, and easy to maintain. This also has a virtual DOM. So a virtual DOM is a virtual representation of a UI that is kept in memory and then later on synced to the real DOM in one of the Vue instance lifecycle hooks. So we also have 2 different ways to use Vue. We can use it to control part of the HTML page, or like we discussed, we can use it to implement an entire front end of a web application. So that is Vue, and then we are going to look into how to install Vue. So there are 3 recommended ways. We can use the npm or yarn install. Also, we have a Vue CLI, that's the official CLI for installing, and there are also another CLI. It's called Vite. This was released in 2020, 2 years back. This was also done by Ivan Yu. So what is special about Vite is it's targeting two bottlenecks. This also provides a faster and leaner development environment. The two bottlenecks are slow server startup. So this is addressed by modularizing. So the code base is categorized into two, the node modules as well as the source code. So the source code is served on demand. That's how it's addressed. And the slow updates is addressed by doing hot module replacement. So yeah, I have given an example here. This is how we install Vue using the Vite CLI. And yeah. Next, we're going to look at how to debug a Vue application. So there is a Chrome extension called Vue.js DevTools. So this gives us an overview of the components that's used in the Vue application. So let's say we visit a route link, and then all the components that belong to that page will be loaded here in the components list. We also can get we also can get an overview of the states that's used in the application and also routes that we have in the application. The state section enables us to time travel mutations. I will get into it later in the webinar. We will start off with the basics. Yeah, so how do you create the Vue application? First, we need to create the application instance. So this is the heart of the application. This is where everything depends on. So we have, you can see in the example in the main.js file, there is a create app method I have used. This is how you use how you create the application instance. And then we have to pass the root component, which is the app.vue, into the application create app method. So we are going to tell Vue thereafter how to which part of the index.html page or the application that we need to let Vue control. For that, we have to use the mount method. And in the mount method, we pass on the DOM selector, telling Vue to plug the application instance into the index.html page. Yeah, that is the basic idea. So also the application instance, it's kind of like the middleman between the DOM and the business logic. There's also each of these methods exposed by the application instance also returns the instance itself. So it enables us to chain methods. Yeah, that is it. That's how you create an instance. Now we will look into binding data. Yeah, the most basic form of binding data to the instance is using the data interpolation, Vue also has a data option, which gives us the reactive state, helps us reactive state of application. Yeah, so interpolations are used only within, like in between the HTML tags. So you have to add double curly braces, and then you use the data property here. So each time the data property is changed, it's going to update everywhere that it has been used. And yeah. Then let's say we have a image URL, like in here, in the example below the using vbind. So in that case, the URL is going to be dynamic. If it's a dynamic one, we have to bind a property to that. For that, we use the vbind directive. So vbind directive accepts the attribute name as the parameter, and then you can bind the value within quotations. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm gonna go fast in covering the Yeah, sorry about that. Next, we're going to look into functions. So every application has functions. In Vue, we handle it with the methods property. Methods option. So methods option accepts the JavaScript. It's a JavaScript object with functions. With a list of functions. It's just like in vanilla JavaScript. You can use the parameters, and you can also bind them to the template within interpolations or with vbind directive. I think I missed this. The vmodel directive that is used for two-way data binding, kind of like in forms. Let's say we have a user input, user input, and then we need to bind the user input to a property in our application. In that case, we use the vmodel directive. So it updates two ways. So let's say we update the directive here, data property here, and then it's going to update the input value. And if we update the input value, it's going to update the data property. Yeah, in interactive user interfaces, we have to react to certain user inputs, kind of like button click. For that, we need to listen to these events. So the event listening is handled by using the vOn directive in Vue. So we can use the vOn click. vOn directive accepts the event name as the parameter, and then you can pass the logic here within the quotations, or you can also pass the method explicitly, or you can just point it to the method itself. So every time you bind a method here, it's going to pass automatically. The event object will be passed to the method, or if there is another argument passed as the first argument, you need to explicitly bind the event object to the method pass it as a parameter to the method. Then we are going to look at computed properties. Where do we use it? Let's say we have a list of items, and then we need to get only the items that belong to a certain category. In this case, we need to do a computing or filtering out. For this, we have the computed option in Vue. You can see here the computed options. I have given examples. So the full name is using it's a combination of first name and the last name. Also the formatted text. So computed properties by default they're getters, but you can also set the dependent values. This is different from methods because it's a cached property. Cache method, it is re-rendered only when one of these dependencies change. You can use them just like in data properties, in interpolations, or you can also bind them. Next, we will look into watchers. So what are watchers? This is used mostly for expensive operations. Let's say we want to change, or we want to do an API call based on another property value change. In that case, we use watchers. So this is also an object with a bunch of methods. So the watch method, in the example given here, the first name, we are watching the first name data property, and the watch method is accepting the new value and the old value, both. So then enabling us to change another property or do an API call. So every developer wants to reuse the code. So for that, we have an option in Vue. We have components. So you need to create components to make the code reusable. Component is also Vue instance. You can think of it as a custom HTML element with a name. So components, they encapsulate the logic. the template and the styling all in one file, enabling us to use it anywhere in the application. So they also have the same options like in the root instance. The data, methods, computed, watched, and also lifecycle hooks. I will explain the lifecycle hooks later in a later slide. And so for components, we can register them globally or locally. Globally, you have to add it to the Vue application instance itself, the root instance, providing the name. And when you're using it in the template, you have to use the kebab case. So in the local registration, we need to pass the list of components into the components option here. So the shopping cart item would be the name of the component, but when we are using it in the template, we need to use the kebab case. But next we are going to look at how to communicate between components. So the components are going to be useless without being able to communicate in between. For that, we have props and emitting of events. For props are custom HTML attributes. We have in HTML element, the custom HTML element. So this you can add in the props option of a Vue instance. You can also validate them using required or type, providing the type of the object, the property. Or you can also add the validator method. Could be static or dynamic. To make it dynamic, you have to use the vbind directive, and you can use them as just like data properties or computer properties with interpolations or vbind directive. So how do you communicate from a child to the parent component? We emit events in this case. So the emit method is exposed by Vue itself. It's a built-in one. It accepts at least one argument, that is the name of the event. So in the root component, we listen to the event, and then we add the logic that is to be executed when the event is triggered. So in the example here, I have the shopping cart item component. So this is the logic that is within the shopping cart item. In the methods update quantity, I am emitting an event called update quantity, and I'm listening to it in the root component itself, and then I'm calling the update quantity method. This is used in the parent component. I will show that later. So that's the basic idea of components, and I'm gonna look into composition API. So all this time, so far we've looked into the options API, but now we're gonna look into a composition API. It's also another way of developing components. So in the composition API, the template, the styling, props, events, everything is the same, but there's a difference. The difference is the data, methods, computed, and watched. Those are all merged into one set of method, which is run at the component creation. So this was introduced because it's really hard when one logic is spread across several options. You have to jump in from one option to the other to understand the code. To get rid of this, we have the composition API, so you can actually put everything that belongs to one logic inside the setup method. This also accepts two arguments, the props and context. The props are same, just like in the options API. Context is an object, JavaScript object with three properties: the attributes, slots, and emits. So the attributes is the same like in props. Same like props, but which is not defined in the props section. So if we pass on item here, attribute item here, let's say we pass on a property, and then we do not define it in the component here as the cart item, then it is considered an attribute. Yeah, let's look at the lifecycle of view instance. So every view instance has a lifecycle of its own. There are 4 main events of a lifecycle. We have the creation, mounting, updates, and destruction. So each of these events has 2 hooks, which is run in the lifecycle, that is the before and then the after event, after hooks. So in options API, it's a little different. Sorry, these are all exposed as options in the options API, but in the composition API, we need to import this. So the reason we need to import it because in composition API is trying to keep the application lightweight as possible. So let's look at how it works. So when we create the application, we move in first. The first hook that is called is the before create. In before create, the reactive data or the events, those are not available. So this is what initialize those. And then we go into the created. So we have the reactive data in events. Then we are going to move into before mount. So when the the view instance moves from the created hook to the before mount hook, this is where the compilation happens, the compilation of the template, the interpolation, and also the whatever the placeholders that we use, those will be replaced with more concrete values. And in before mount, we don't see anything in the screen, but that's because the DOM is not rendered. So when the instance moves into the mounted phase, then we see something on the screen. So the DOM is rendered. Let's say, so we have the view instance, a mounted view instance. Let's say there's a data change in the instance. In that case, there's a new lifecycle created with before update. So in before update, the DOM is not pre-rendered. The changes are not visible. In updated, we see the changes. This DOM is re-rendered. Then we have the instance on mounting hooks. These are in here in instance before on mount. This is where the component gets turned down. So this is still fully functional, but you can use it for removing event listeners. And in unmounted, everything is going to be gone. Now, there's one tip in created. We can also use this hook to call the API, like do API calls. Why? Because this happens earlier in the synchronous initialization process. That is why we can get created, and before mount would be the ideal hooks for that. Then we have some not so popular hooks. These are used. So activated and deactivated hooks, these are used only for keep live components. Those are specific to that. So activated hook is called when the component is activated. It's kind of like focused. When it loses the focus, it's going to call deactivated hook. And the error captured and on render track, these are for debugging purposes. Error captured is usually called when the child component is throwing an error. That's when it's called. And on render track helps us identify what causes the re-render of an instance. So that's overall view of the lifecycle hooks. Then we are going to look into view X. So we looked at how to pass data between components. So when the application grows, it's going to be really hard to keep track which props have been passed down or which events have been emitted. So for this, we need to have like a centralized store, like a single source of truth to keep track of the state of the application. So this is where Vuex comes in. This is Vue's own state management pattern and library. This provides a single source of truth. Every component has direct access to the global state. Also at the center of the Vuex application, there's a store. This is a container that hosts the state of the application. So it's not different. The Vuex instance is not different from the Vue instance. It's the same. So the reactive data is handling the state. So for data, in Vue we have data, in Vuex we have state. And in computed, so in Vue we have computed, and for that we have getters in the Vuex store. And for methods we have actions. There is one thing extra in Vuex, that is the mutations. In Vuex we cannot we should not directly alter the state using an action. But this we need to commit mutations. That's why we have mutations. Kind of like the middleman from action to the state. Then we're going to look at how it works. Let's say we have, let's say we have a button. I'm going to add some button at the quantity here to add it to the shopping cart. In this case, I'm going to click on this button, add to cart, or I'm going to increase the value and add to cart here. So it's going to update the cart quantity here. So when you click on that, this is going to dispatch an action, and then it's going to commit the mutation. And from there, you're going to update the state through the mutation, and then the component. The cart value is going to be updated with a getter because it's like a computed property. So how do you install? To install it, you can use npm install Vuex at next, and then you need to create an instance of the store. You can provide, here I have provided modularized stores. So in my application, in the shopping cart that I just showed you, we have product store and shopping cart store separated into modules. So instead of doing this, you can also pass on the state, the getters, commit, and dispatch actions and properties, and then we have to tell Vue to use it in the application instance. And how to access the store. So when we ask Vue views to the application to use the Vue store, it's gonna expose us with this $store object, and then from there you can access the state, getters, commit, and dispatch methods. Also, you can use the map state and map helpers. These are the map helpers relevant to state, getters, commit, and dispatch. So in the component, when you're using the helpers for map state and map getters, both are like computed properties. So you can add it to the computed option, and map actions and mutations, those are kind of methods. You can add them in the methods option in the component. And we have Vue router next. So how do you navigate between components? This is done by the official router for Vue.js, Vue router. This is a little bit different from the traditional routing. How is it different? So let's say we enter a URL in the address bar. When that is done, it's going to send a request to the server. So the server is going to respond with the page. So each time you click on a link, it's going to refresh the page here. This is called server-side routing. And in Vue, it's a little different. How? So this is using the client-side routing. So when you enter the URL, it's going to respond with the page, but with also the rest of the application. So when you click on another link, it's not going to reload the page, nor send another request or a response. it's going to send a request, but it's not going to send another response because view, with the help of view router, is going to compare the differences and it's going to load it on the screen without a reloading of the page. This is how you install view router. To configure it, you have to create the instance, router instance, and then pass on an array with a list of route objects. And then you have to tell view to use it using the use method in the application instance. Gonna expose the router, this route object or route object. Yeah, so this is a list of routes that we have in the shopping cart application. So each route object can have in the URL the name or the component to render. You can also pass the props true. So when the props are passed as true, if you have any parameters in the path, it's going to be added as a prop into the component. This way you can access the parameters via the route object. How do you render the components when you click on different links? Let's say we have I'm going to show the products link here. When you click on the products link, this means you are going to click on the router link, and then router link is going to refer to the routes list. Going to pick the object that has the same name that we have given to the to property, and then it's going to output the component that we have given here. How is that done and where is it rendered? It's going to be rendered in the root component. So the app.view is the root component. So in the root component, we have this router view placeholder. This is where the component is going to be loaded. So router view is acting like a placeholder. So each time you click on a link, it's going to refer the routes list and then load the component. Yeah, that's it for the router. Then lastly, we are going to look at some pro tips. You can, for optimizing, this is for optimizing your application. For optimized rendering, you can use V1s. You can use V1s for headers or side pages. Side menus, because these are not going to be, there is no need to re-render these elements. That is why we use V1s. What's special about V1s is going to render only once. So let's say there is a VIF used in combination with V1s. It's going to stick to the initial state of VIF. VIF is used for conditional rendering in Vue. That's something to keep in mind. The next one is vmemo. Vmemo accepts a list of list of values. So each time one of the values change in the array, it's going to re-render the element or the component that we use the vmemo directive. The next step is to use lazy load components with define async component feature. So what happens here is it's going to load on demand. It's not going to load all the components that is using the page at once. It's going to chunk the components and load them on demand. So as an example, I have given here a screenshot that this is the dist folder that we get when you build the application once we use this define async component method. So the product details, product index, product item, all these are components in the application. These will be loaded separately when the define async component function is called. It's going to call the import of the view component. That's it for so I didn't have much time, but I hope this was very helpful. And if you have any questions, you can drop in the chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashani. I believe we do have a couple of questions. Like I said, let's jump to those questions towards the Q&A session at the end. So next up is Jayatu with his session on React. So Jayatu, take it away.
Hi. So, all right. Hope you can see my screen.
Yep,
Sarah?
all clear.
All
Yeah.
right. All right. All right. Thanks, Ashani, for the valuable content. So I'm quickly jumping into the React section. All right. When it's come to the React world, so in 2015, Facebook announced about the React library. So when it's come to the React, this is not a framework. This is tiny library to facilitate creation all kind of web applications. So when it's come to the React, React is totally component based. So when it's come to the reusability and kind of perspective, so it's very easy. And React also have React native version. So if you want to build a cross-platform application for Android, iOS, so we can use React native. It's basically based on the React philosophy. When it's come to the React, so in the world, we have a lot of non-websites like Netflix, PayPal, Facebook. So they are using React at the moment. And React is very popular at the moment, and we have a lot of community members, and we have a lot of very good ecosystem with a lot of library along with the React world. Okay, in this session, so I'm just giving you some tips how to create a React application and what are the points we have to think and what are the libraries we can choose, kind of thing. So I'm not going to deep dive into the React architecture and React problems, but I'm saying like so how we set up the environment and how we choose the libraries. So first, I choose problem. So I have a API which is providing me movies. So I'm going to create an application with a search. In that search input, so I can type any movie. So it will give me a list of movies. By clicking at one movie, so it will show me the details. So if I'm like with the movie, so I can add it to the wish list. So I can see the wish list as well. So it's kind of very small application. So I'm going to explain step by step so how I can proceed with that solution. Okay, first, when we are solutioning a web application with the React, first we have to decide whether we are going with the server-side rendering or client-side rendering, because React providing both server-side rendering and the client-side rendering. So when you talk about server-side rendering, if you want to improve the SEO and if you want to increase the initial page load speed, so we have to choose server-side rendering as an example. Let's say like for a PDP view in e-commerce site, so we have to get data from a lot of sources like from the recommendation engine, from the wish list, and from the stock and from the image services. So if you are doing client-side rendering for that, so user has to wait a lot of time, and in the screen we can see a lot of loaders. Yeah, so then in that case we are like choosing server-side rendering. We are doing all the rendering stuff inside the server and serve the HTML part to the client. But in my movie details. So from the server side, I don't want to do nothing. So it's like no need to choosing about server side rendering. So from my solution, so I'm going to select client side rendering. So as a tip, so if you want to select server side rendering, so you can select either Next.js or React XSR to accommodate that server side rendering part. Okay, then I'm going to how to start a React application. So in that case, we have React CLI. So React CLI is coming with the higher versions of the Node and NPM. So we can use that create React app, and with the application name, it will create a skeleton of my application. So that React CLI has so many options. You can test, and you can see in the documentation. So let's say like if I want to, by default React is coming with the JavaScript, but if you want to create application with TypeScript, you just need to pass some parameters, and you can create a TypeScript skeleton with the React CLI. So in that case, so you have a lot of options there. So when it's come to the folder structure, so React community advise you to keep it simple, don't make it overcomplicated. So let's say like if I'm creating a component, if I created a complex hierarchy of folders, so the developer might confuse like, so where are you going to put that component, in the shared folder or in the page or container or in the component? So like it's confusing. So I might advise like keep that in very simple. So don't overthink about the folder structure, keep it like very simple, and based on the features and file types, you can group by them. So before starting the solutioning and the component, you have to think about the clarity and the consistency of the code. So in that case, you have to configure some linting based on JavaScript or TypeScript. If you are using JavaScript, you have to configure ESLint or prettier. If you are using TypeScript, you can use TSLint. So when it's come to the linting, so it saves your time and energy. So let's say like when we are doing the code reviews, we are not going to talk about code styles anymore, because they are providing a consistency of the code with every developer. So SonarQube is a tool that which is getting all the linting information to the application. From the application. So let's say like organization, so everybody have a clear vision of the code styles and the errors inside the code. So we can use that too. So when it's come to the Git hooks, let's say like when we are pushing commits to the Git, we might have some problems with the unit testing. Let's say like if I'm doing some breaking changes and I'm trying to push it to the repository. So if I have Git hooks with Husky or something kind of that, so it will automatically run the unit test and tell me, so your change is breaking some unit test, and you have to look into that and you have to fix that. So then it will mitigate the problems. So I'm using VS Code at the moment to develop all the React applications. So in that case, we can use some extensions to mitigate your time. Like if you are doing some spellings mistakes, so you can use code spell checkers. You can use Git lengths for the Git related stuff. So React.js code snippets to create skeleton of the class components or the function components. Like there are a lot of extensions you can use to easier your life. All right, so I'll move to my code bit. So this is the skeleton application when you are creating application from create React app. So you will get something kind of this kind of hierarchy. You have app.js and index.js. So if you already configured all the lintings, let's say I'm going to change this to single chorus. So here you can see, so the ID showing me an error. So simply I can click this and I can fix it. So that's the beauty of linting and the VS Code. So if I'm doing some mistake with spellings, so it will notify me that this is unknown word, so you have to change it likewise. So yeah, so here, so I will I have added some git hooks when I'm doing some commits. So it will automatically run the unit test. If it is failing, so it will notify me. Let's say like, so I have changed my unit test, so now it's failing. So you can see my unit test is failing. It's not going to allow me to commit my changes. So that's the beauty of Git hooks. So, all right, so I'll again move to my presentation. All right. From the so let's I'm moving to the architecture perspective. So when it's come to the React architecture, so first you have to choose hooks or classes. So earlier when React introduced, we have like class components. So, but eventually they introduce hooks. So the main reason they introduce hooks is in the classes we have, when we are using class components, we have to use a lot of lifecycle methods. So we have nobody knows the exact definition of this keyword, and we have to bind functions. So there are a lot of problems. So that's why they introduce hooks. The modern pattern of React applications, they are using hooks. So when we are thinking about the stylings, so we can use good old CSS, or we can choose SAS or less as a precompilers, or we can go with the style components. It's like very new, so we are not going to use separate file for the styles inside the component file. So we are defining styles as the JavaScript objects. So by nature, React applications are single page, but if you want to add routings, you can use React router library to add routing into the application. Okay, so when it's come to the architecture perspective, so state management is a very important part of the React application. So state in the sense, so it's the current situation of the components. Let's say like I am developing a counter. So if I click on the plus button, so it will increase by 1. So it's the newest status of the component. So when we are dealing with a lot of components, we have to share the states between parent component to child component to parent component. So by nature, so React mechanism is prop dealing. That means passing all the states from parent to children, but it's kind of a heuristic method. So in that case, we have different libraries to accommodate that situations. By default, with the React coming with the context API, we can use context API to mitigate that prop dealing. We can use that as a state management solution. The most common solution at the moment is Redux. But if you are doing a simple application like with minimum number of components, so I think we don't need to introduce Redux. Because when it's come to the Redux, so Redux is a different architecture, so we have a different knowledge to handle that. So we want different knowledge to handle that. So I think if you are creating a very big, very with a lot of routers, and we are doing server-side rendering with initial props like situations, we have to use Redux. The other one is Mobex. Mobex actually using a pub/sub mechanism to do the state management, and there are many more. So you have to choose based on your requirement. So in that case, in my application, the movie selector, so I'm going to use context API because I don't have so many components to communicate each other. So when it's come to the application, so we have to deal with backend. So nowadays, REST API and GraphQL backends are very common. So when we are integrate with the backend, so we need to think about the different status. Like, so when we are calling with the backends, the loading states and the error states and the success states. So how we are going to display them in our application, so we have to think about that, and paginations, finite scrolls, caching, and window focusing, repaging. So there are the problems coming with when we are communicate with the backend. So when we are choosing a library, we have to focus on those areas as well. If you have like a one API to fetch, one or two API to fetch, so I might go with fetch API. So we don't need any third-party library to do that. So we can directly using a fetch API. The other most common API, common library is Axios. So if I'm using Axios with the React application, so I have to think about how I'm going to handling with a loading, error, or success status. So I have to have a mechanism. If I'm using Redux, there are several ways like middlewares, chunks to handle those things. If I'm using GraphQL, so the most common library is Apollo client. In Apollo client, they already have caching, pagination, final scroll, and all the status like loading, error, and success. So React Query is the newest one. So React Query is by default supporting GraphQL, but supporting REST as well. So in that case, React Query also supporting with the loading, error, and success status, and a lot of features with caching, window focus repaging, pagination, and finite scrolls. So in my solution, I'm going to select React Query with Axios to fetch all the communicate with the REST API. When it's come to the application, so I think we have to write unit testing because so many developers are involved with it, and when somebody is doing a breaking change, it will be a crucial part when we are running on the unit testing. So it will inform them like you are doing a breaking change. So I might say like 100% unit testing is doable, but not practical. But you have to do like in the integration point when it comes to the when we are integrate with the backend component. So you have to write unit tests for that component, but some components you can skip. So the most common unit testing library at the moment for React is React testing library. So it has so many features to do all the testing back and forth. In other than that, so when we are thinking about the application, so we have to think about the accessibility of the application. So let's say like how it's supported the screen recorders, screen readers, and how it interact with the tab keys. Likewise, so we have like a plan. We have to have a plan with accessibility. So how we are providing accessibility with the application. So when it comes to the JSX files, it supports all the ARIA labels as the HTML5 API provided. And as a developers, we always used to use divs to develop the application. But when it's come to the accessibility, it's a wrong practice. So we have to use semantic HTML like now, header, UL, li, and table, and buttons, and likewise article likewise. So don't put divs anywhere. Like if you want to, if I want to add a button kind of thing, so I'm using a div and I'm doing styling and putting all the functionality to that div. So when it's come to the accessibility, it's not going to work because for the tab keys and the screen reader, it's not going to work well. But yeah, and as well as the labeling. So if you have input and if you have a radio buttons or something kind of that, when it's come to the forms, we have to add a label. So then when it come to the screen readers, they can read it very well. So when we are developing application, we have to think about that as well. All right. So yeah, then I will show my okay. So this is the hierarchy of my folder. So I have hooks. In that hooks, so I added all the backend integration with the React query. So you can see in the, if you are using React query, it will generate me by default is loading error and data properties. And I have a context and I have a component. So I like maintaining a flat hierarchy. So for the components, so for the important components, I write down all the unit test with the backend integration. I mock all the APIs. Yeah. So this is the application. So if you if I input something like backpack, it will search. So you can see the loader is appearing. So that's the states of what we have to handle. So if I have an error, so I have to display in there. So if I click on the movie, so you can see